In life, we all encounter obstacles, and those obstacles come in all different shapes, sizes, and forms. The question is, how do we handle those obstacles? Do we attack them head on, or do we allow them to make us quit? Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast, where we aim to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up on themselves, their dreams, or their goals. We will interview successful people from all walks of life as they share their no-quit stories when they had the choice to give up or give in, but they didn't. We thank you for listening, and we hope to be that jolt of positivity as you go for your greatness. Welcome to episode number 153 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is routine. Our quote of the day comes to us from Mike Murdoch. The secret of your future is hidden in your daily routine. Today's episode is sponsored by the good people over at West Fair Communications, who publish the Westchester County Business Journal and the Fairfield County Business Journal. These newspapers do a wonderful job in covering all aspects of the business world within two of the most influential markets in the New York metropolitan area. You can also take advantage of their daily news feeds, which keep track on the companies and thought leaders in these important regions. For more information, take a look at www.westfaironline.com. Trust me, once you start reading, you won't quit. I'm excited to bring you today's podcast, as our guest recently published a book on the importance of morning routines. As this is a topic we often discuss in detail with each guest, Ashley Brown shares some great advice and insight from her incredible book. As morning routines are something we're all very familiar with, I think you will really and truly enjoy today's episode. Ashley, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Thanks. I'm so excited to be here.
I appreciate it. So the first question we ask everybody is, are you ready to make it happen today?
Absolutely.
Good stuff. So the number one objective of our show is to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up. And I was curious if you had either a personal no-quit story or perhaps a challenging time that tested you and you could have given up and given in, but you didn't.
Oh, sure. So I guess most recently, several years ago, I was feeling sort of lost and dissatisfied. I had a good career as a freelance writer, and I loved being a mother and a wife, but it felt like something was missing. And I even felt sort of ungrateful that I wasn't fulfilled. You know, it was like you have your health and a good home and your family, and what more do you want? But it was just this nagging feeling that I could be doing more. And about this time, I started getting emails about a writing course that Martha Beck and Elizabeth Gilbert were doing called Write Into Light. And I kept deleting them because I was feeling burned out on writing because of my freelance career, even though I had wanted to write books ever since I was little. And then one morning I woke up and literally my first thought was, I have to register for that class. And I was afraid that it was past the deadline, but I checked and it was actually the very last day to register. So I did. And then right after I started that class, I got the idea for my book. And the people that I met in the class helped me continue on with it and gave me ideas. Some of them were in the book and helped me make it to the finish line. So it was really a life-changing experience.
So just one day, just you woke up and had that thought or that idea?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, good thing you didn't do it 1 or 2 days later then.
Right, exactly.
So I wanted to ask you, if you wouldn't mind, just telling our listeners a little bit about who you are and what exactly you do.
So I'm a writer, and I'm the author of a book, A Beautiful Morning, which is about morning rituals. And I also write a blog called Joy Detectives, which is about seeking joy and sharing it with others.
Well, we will touch on that book in a couple minutes. And before we went live, you and I spoke on it a little bit, but it has a personal connection with me for many different ways. But I wanted to ask you, how do you personally define success, or what does success mean for you?
Success is being happy in your life, no matter what you are doing or what you have. It's waking up every day feeling excited and energized and grateful, just with what you have.
Now, I think that question touches on so many different possibilities as far as answers and how people can really talk about it for their specific life. And I love that question because it's just interesting because we get to know a little bit about our guests. And wanted to ask you, if you had to, but you could only define yourself in one word, what would that word be?
I think positive. I am always looking for the silver lining.
I love that word. We talk about that all the time. So speaking of books, and your book, which I got a chance to read, I thought it was incredible. And obviously, as I touched on before we went live, to me, I'm in the process of writing my own book, but also studying what it is about morning rituals or daily rituals and habits that really take people to the next level in whatever area. So I have to ask you, before we touch on your book, really, where did your interest or intrigue come from, rituals and morning rituals?
Well, it was really out of necessity. I was not very happy with the way that my daily life was going. As a freelancer, I work for myself. I had complete control over my day and my schedule, but I found myself sleeping in and then getting up at the last minute feeling really frantic and disorganized and unmotivated and sluggish and irritable and all of these things. And I thought, this is ridiculous. Why am I feeling this way? I started looking for ways to make myself happier, read a bunch of books and took some classes and things, and started realizing that that my mornings were just a mess, and I wanted to try to fix that first. And so I started looking for ways to have a nicer morning, and a couple of different ideas that I got from things that I read or classes that I took about, instead of jumping up and racing right into the day, take a moment and be mindful and just breathe. And so I started with just that. I started with just waking up, and instead of jumping out of bed, I would breathe for a few minutes and kind of slowly come awake before I would get up. And just that made a huge difference. So then I started thinking, oh, okay, I'm onto something. And I started researching a little bit more, coming up with some different ideas, and sort of slowly grew a morning ritual, which I didn't even know that it was a thing until I started making one up. And the more I looked for information, the more I found.
So I have to ask you, because we ask every single guest, if you have a specific morning ritual that you swear by.
I do. I have a sort of a perfect ritual that I do when I have enough time. And then if I don't have all the time, I'll just do one or two things. But usually I'll wake up around 7, and I don't wake up with an alarm. I don't use an alarm anymore. I wake up on my own usually, which is really nice. And then I do morning pages, which is a writing practice from a book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, where you just do 3 pages of stream of consciousness writing. And then I stretch, and then I try to meditate for a few minutes, which is still something that's an ongoing challenge for me. And then I make my coffee and I take it outside. And that is one of the things that I almost always do, even if I don't have time for anything else, because I found that taking my coffee, standing in the backyard with my feet in the grass, looking at the sunlight, listening to the birds, it really is a peaceful way to start the day, and really sets me up for a good day.
No, it's awesome that you touch on that. And one of the things I want to ask is, going back to the meditation, is that something that I'm in the process of working on, trying myself. Do you have an app that you use, or what are you doing in that regard?
I don't use an app for it. I just try to follow my breath. But in the afternoon, I'll do a little guided meditation after lunch. And for that one, I'm using the Abraham Hicks, I think it's called Into the Vortex app, which has 4 different meditations. It's just a free app, and you can choose, one's general, one's focused on physical well-being, and one's on relationships. And there's a couple of different ones, and it's just a 15-minute, really pleasant guided meditation. And that is really helpful to me because I have a hard time turning my thoughts off.
No, I'm glad you touched on that, because that's the same challenge I have. Is I sit down to meditate, and it goes well for a minute or two, and then all of a sudden it's almost like I have ADHD on steroids, because I'm going this way, that way. And the reason I asked specifically about that app is we always like to recommend different things to our listeners in regards to what they're using, how they're doing it. So definitely we'll recommend that. And I'm actually going to check it myself, because I think the one thing we like to do on each show is to teach our listeners different things, meaning here's an idea, here's a concept. It doesn't work for everybody, but try it out.
Right.
So I want to touch on your book for a minute, because I just think it's so interesting, and I think it's something that I'm actually seeing, and I've seen, and I go to many, many bookstores almost every week, not only because I have a book coming out myself, but also I just enjoy bookstores and reading. And I've seen so many books about rituals or the importance of starting your morning off on the right way, whether it's fitness, whether it's personal development. So I think it's something that's really interesting. And I wanted to ask you, if might be a tough question, but if there were one or two things and only one or two things you could recommend for our listeners to really improve their mornings, what would they be?
Well, I think the first thing that I've discovered and is really helpful for me and for several people that I've recommended it to, they say it's really a positive change, is to not look at your phone. A lot of people, they just did a study, and actually a majority of people will look at their phone within the first 5 minutes of waking up. And then that just sucks you into social media and your email box, your inbox, and everything like that can really bring in negativity and distraction, and you lose focus, and then you can't set your own agenda for the day. And so if you don't look at your phone and instead you replace that with something positive and uplifting, something that really makes you feel good and makes you happy, like if it's meditating or reading something uplifting or listening to music, going for a walk, something like that, then you're starting from a place of peace and you're centered in yourself. And then you can sort of go forth in your day from your own agenda as opposed to, reacting to other people's. And so that would definitely be one. And the other for me is going outside, because getting sunlight first thing in the morning helps reset your body clock so you sleep better. It spurs serotonin so you have a mood boost right away, and it can ground you. And like I said before, it's a really peaceful way to start the day. So I really recommend that.
No, I think that's so neat that you touched on that, because we've actually been talking about obviously morning rituals, and a guest that was just on, Whitney Cox, she has a rule. It's called the no cell phone zone for the first hour when she gets up. And you talked about reactive versus proactive before, or reactive, excuse me, and I think that's the main difference that I've found from asking this question to our guest is, as soon as you pick up your phone, all of a sudden you become reactive and you're responding to this, to that, whether it's social media, whether it's emails, and as opposed to proactive. And I do want to just say one thing that I have had a couple of guests that swear by that rule of the no cell phone, but the one difference that they've had is they do sometimes pick up their phone to use one of those meditation apps. So I think there is an asterisk for that.
Yeah. You just have to be, you have to have self-discipline, right? You have to not look at anything else, just go straight to the app.
That's so much easier said than done.
Right.
In the beginning of your book, you talked about morning ritual. It's putting yourself first. I wanted you, if you wouldn't mind, just touching on that for a minute.
Well, it really is, literally putting yourself first. And a lot of people, especially women who have children, or families that they're taking care of, or even just people who have really demanding jobs, we tend to put ourselves last. And we give everything we have to everybody else. And then if there's any time left over, then that's what we get. And of course, there's never time left over. So if you take the moment in the morning to put yourself first, then you are recharging yourself every day, and you are better able to live your best life that way.
No, I love that. And something else that you touched on early on the book is the concept that I always try to get across to people is starting small. I wouldn't mind if you just touch on that for a second.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think one of the women that I interviewed, one of the things that she said was we can really overwhelm ourselves. When we start something new and we think, oh, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get up at 3 a.m. every day and I'm going to run 10 miles and I'm going to do this and this and this. And of course, we burn ourselves out right away because you just can't sustain something at that level when you're jumping off a cliff like that. So if you start small with just the tiniest baby step of an action, then you almost can't fail at it. And so it becomes really easy to incorporate that. And everyone knows changing habits, adding a new good habit is enormously difficult. So the easier you can make it, the better. And if you just start with that one little change, then that actually makes a difference. Like for me, staying in bed for a minute and breathing deeply before I got up, I would not have thought that would really make that much difference, but it really did.
No, so that's so key that you touch on that is the importance of starting small. And one of the things we touch on quite often is small victories lead to huge successes down the road.
Definitely.
And I had a guest probably 4 or 5 months ago that was talking on one of the episodes, and he was very specific that people love to start things, but they don't like to finish things. And I believe the science behind goals is everybody has those big goals. Like you said, you get up at 3 a.m. and run 10 miles. And what happens is it sounds really good, looks really good for the first day or two, and all of a sudden people don't want to do it. So I love the concept of starting small and having those little victories along the way.
Oh, yeah.
So here's a question for you. Assuming the 20-year-old version of yourself would have listened, what's one piece of advice that you would have given to the 20-year-old Ashley?
I would have told her to take more risks. Growing up, I was always told, go to college, graduate, get a good job, don't take risks. Essentially, creative people can't make money. You don't do what your heart wants you to do. You go where the money is and the security is and all of that. And while I wouldn't change anything about the path that I took, it really would have been fun to maybe write a book before I was almost 50 and have a chance to, make that be the focus of my life rather than, going through a sort of circuitous route of working corporate jobs and things like that before I finally made it here.
So speaking on writing that first book, I know so many people have an idea or concept or a dream on their bucket list is writing a book. If you could give one piece of advice to the listeners out there, that for those that maybe want to write their own book, what's one piece of advice about going ahead and actually writing that book?
It's definitely just keep going. It's real easy in the beginning to listen to the negative voice either inside your head or from other people that says that you can't do it. But if you just keep going and do a little bit every day, I think Elizabeth Gilbert says 15 minutes, set your timer, sit down, write for 15 minutes every day, no matter what. And you just slowly, again, start small and you take those small steps toward it every day and you don't stop. Like your podcast, don't quit, you will end up with a finished manuscript. Even if it takes you a long time, that doesn't matter.
No, I like how you touched on that, the 15 minutes. It's something we talk about almost on every show is the concept of time block. And I think it's so important to have those little buckets of time. And although 15 minutes does seem like it's a short time, like you said before, is if you don't put yourself first, you never have enough time for anything.
Right.
So here's a question for you. If you could have dinner with anybody, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Could it be a fictional character?
Of course. It's your free question to answer how you want.
Okay. Mine would be Auntie Mame. Do you know that movie?
I know of the movie, but I'm not familiar with it.
Okay. Well, I highly recommend that you watch it. And if any of your listeners haven't seen it, it's a fantastic movie. It's about this woman who has all of these amazing adventures. She's a wild madcap person and just really keeps reinventing herself. She overcomes all of these obstacles and just keeps going. And it's a very funny movie, but it's also very moving as well and very inspirational to me because she doesn't follow the rules. She does what she wants to do and really lives life to the fullest. She has this great quote where she says, "Life's a banquet and most poor suckers are starving to death." And I would love to sit down and learn more about her and how she got so adventurous.
Well, if you could find a way to make it happen, because she sounds like she'd be a good person to have on the show as well.
Yes, she would. She would.
So speaking of books, I was curious if you've read anything recently or perhaps you're reading something that you'd like to recommend to our listeners.
Oh, yeah. I have so many books that I love. So one is The Artist's Way, which I mentioned before, which is by Julia Cameron. And it's good not just for creative people, but for anybody who just is seeking inspiration or might be blocked or feeling stuck. Also, How to Live a Good Life by Jonathan Fields is a really interesting book about how to live a good life, obviously. And The Four Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin is one that I just finished. And that's really fascinating because she talks about how everyone falls into one of 4 categories based on how they respond to internal and external obligations. And it really gives you a lot of insight into your own behavior and why others act the way they do and how you can use that knowledge to help yourself create good habits and maybe fix some things that bother you about yourself.
Now, is that a relatively new book?
It is. It is. I think it's less than a year for sure. I'm not sure how many months it's been out.
Yeah, I think that's actually popped up onto my Amazon as recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to ask you, something that we often talk about on stage as well as in our courses with our training is the word accountability. And I was curious what accountability means to you.
To me, it would mean being authentic and trustworthy, um, acting in alignment with my values and standing behind my actions.
That's another one of those questions that has no right or wrong answer, just like the success question. And one of the things that we often talk about is the concept of paying it forward. And we have a pay it forward movement that we're working on, and we're doing different things with our videos and in real life as well as with our show. And I was curious what the concept or what the theme pay it forward means to you.
I really like that. I think it definitely means to uh, no matter what you have in your life, you're always better off than someone else. There's always something to be grateful for. There's always something amazing in your life. And if you focus on the gratitude for that and also recognize that other people have difficulties in their lives and have compassion for them no matter what, then you can sort of focus on giving gifts of whether it's your time or your money or whatever it is that you have, the great thing of just random acts of kindness, things like that, making the world a better place just by your actions.
I love that, making the world a better place and random acts of kindness. We have many different challenges at the end of our shows, and that's one of the things that we've probably touched on 15 or so times this year is the challenge of for somebody to do something for somebody else every single day that they don't even know you do it. So it could be something as simple as paying a toll or buying a cup of coffee for somebody. And I think in today's day and age, if we all did that in some way, shape, or form, I think we'd be in a much happier and more positive place.
Oh, yeah.
So here's an interesting question for you. If you could magically snap your finger to exactly 1 year from today and have accomplished any goal whatsoever, what would it be?
That's a really tough one because it's funny. I don't typically set goals. And I know that's very uncommon for most people, but I tend to sort of feel my way towards things and figure out what's coming and sort of which way I want to go based on what shows up. So I don't know. Definitely a level of success in my life and in my writing, feeling like maybe, I know, just making a living being creative from my creativity as opposed to the standard, freelance work for clients or something like that, making a living on my own from my writing.
I like that. See, that was a good answer. Before we let you go, I wanted to ask if you have any parting words you'd like to leave or give our listeners.
Oh, definitely. Make the time to take care of yourself every day. That is not selfish. It is necessary. And something that you can do to do that is just find something that lights you up and do that every day. Give yourself that gift of attention.
I love it. And then for our listeners that would like to follow you or connect with you, or also for those that are interested in purchasing your book, where can they do that?
So the book is available on Amazon. It's also on my book website, which is abeautifulmorningbook.com. And there's a Facebook page, which is just A Beautiful Morning. And I also have my blog at joydetectives.com. And on Instagram, I'm Joy Detective Ashley Brown.
I love it. Well, listen, Ashley, I truly appreciate not only your time, but also sharing some of your advice as well as your book with us. And I definitely recommend to our listeners not only to connect with you, but also look into your book because it's one of the best books I've read in the last few months.
Wow, thank you so much.
I appreciate it, and hopefully we can talk again soon. Thank you for listening to episode number 153. Ashley shared quite a bit with us today, and I think we can all learn from her insight. As she personally took a look at her own morning routine, the idea for her new book was born. Whether you are a mother, father, single, married, young, or old, I would definitely recommend Ashley's new book. When I asked Ashley to define herself in one word, The word she chose was positive, and then she immediately said how she tries to always look for the silver lining. It sounds like such easy advice, but definitely something we can all do more of. It's something we should all do more of. To wrap up today's episode, I challenge each and every single one of you to take a hard look at your own morning routine. Does your morning control you, and do you find yourself constantly reacting, or do you master your morning and start your day and your morning on your own terms? One thing Ashley shared was how a morning ritual puts you first. She also touched on the importance of starting small. Personally, I'm always looking to make improvements on how I start and finish my own day. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I hope you connect with Ashley if you found her information to be useful or helpful. If you are not starting and finishing your own day on your own terms, make a decision now to change. Start small, become proactive as opposed to reactive, and go for your greatness. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.